Alright, I thought I'd do a video on objectivity and subjectivity. For a while now, I've believed that we live in a subjective universe. My reasoning for that is not that complex, actually. The epiphany, I guess you could call it, came about when I was starting to work on my AI project. I was looking at the limitations of an artificial intelligence when you're having it make decisions. And the main problem you have is that the AI only knows the information that's given to it. So it can only construct an internal model of the universe using the data points that it's been given. So that is a big problem with AI because you have the issue where it's not necessarily going to take everything into account when making a decision, and that tends to be where a lot of the problems come from in like science fiction, I guess, with AIs, where like the iRobot's a good example. If I remember right, you've got the big AI kind of the like holographic chick head, I think. I haven't watched iRobot in a while. That believes the best thing for humanity is to be like put in like confinement, I guess, and be controlled by the robots because that's the only way to keep humans safe from each other, I think. And to the AI, that's obviously a completely rational decision, but it hasn't got all the facts. It doesn't know the kind of human perspective, which is that that's not cool. And even if it's going to keep us safe, it doesn't have the perspective of like free will and stuff, I guess. And you get that. That's kind of the core of where I got my subjective theory from, because if you how to put this, if you apply those same standards to a human, then you end up with exactly the same problem, which is that no human has a complete perspective, including other people's thoughts. And we're limited by the amount of information that we can receive through our senses. So it seems pretty obvious to me, because if we accept that our senses are limited and the tools we can make to enhance our senses are also limited by our human level of knowledge, let's say, then you've really got no way of knowing that anything is empirically true. So, just based on that concept alone, it seems like everything must be subjective from a human standpoint, and we've really got no way of verifying anything empirically, because even empirical data is like seen through observation, and it's like repeatable. But something being repeatable does not necessarily make it objectively true. Like, if you think about a haunted house, you could have hundreds, thousands of people visiting this haunted house and all coming out swearing that they saw a ghost. Or you could have someone visiting a magician's show, and you could have everyone who comes out swearing that it was magic. Empirically, that magician is doing the same show every night, and the majority of the people who go to see it might not believe it's magic, but if you were targeting the right demographics, you could definitely say it was. Like, I guess this is a similar thing with, like, religious, like, what do you get in America? What are they called? The evangelists, right? Like the guys who are like faith healers and stuff. Pretty much everyone who goes to see them comes out believing that this dude has cured people's whatever, arthritis or like stuff that's more serious than that. And again, he's doing that consistently, and he's consistently got a whole bunch of people going to see him and coming out believing it. And they would argue that is empirical data because they've been there, they've observed it. Other people have been there who have observed it, and then they've shared perspectives and reached the same conclusion, which is that this guy is a faith healer. Someone else with a bit more skepticism would not believe it, but you could say the same about anything, and just because you're more skeptical, it doesn't mean that you have some position of authority where you can define this is empirical, that is empirical, this is not empirical, you know? Because at the end of the day, your claim or your belief that you are skeptical, you should be skeptical of that. If you are truly skeptical, you should be aware that your own judgment is just as flawed as everyone else's. It just might be at a different level. So even if you're the most skeptical guy in the world and you're debunking a whole bunch of stuff, it doesn't mean that you are an authority on what's real. It means that you might be an authority on what's not real. But it's funny. People say, like, you can't disprove a negative, or whatever the phrase is. Like, you can only prove that something is true, not that something is false. But I'm not sure that I buy into that. I think you can't prove anything, really, depending on your definition of proof. Because all you can do is increase your certainty to a point where you don't need to worry about it. Because you're certain that it's objectively true. Not that that means it is objectively true, but you're certain that it is. And in the course of your life, you are not experience anything that's giving you any reason to doubt that. But that doesn't mean it is objectively true. All it means is that you haven't experienced anything that credibly disproves it. So the obvious stuff for there is like faith healing, or like we didn't go to the moon maybe, or we did go to the moon, or the earth is flat, or the earth is round, or the universe is a simulation, or all these things all have the same flaw that you can't really prove or disprove any of them. all you can do is increase your level of certainty by accessing more information. And I think that applies to everything, because everything is limited by our senses. Even the fact that I have a table here, the only reason I believe that is that I have experienced this table regularly on a daily basis. And over the years, as I've grown up, I've gained a confirmation bias that physical objects exist, and my definition of physical objects is something that I cannot put my hand through. But that doesn't mean that is objectively true. All it means is I've never seen any information to disprove it. An alien could arrive tomorrow and say, look, did you know if you, I don't know, move your hand fast enough, you can actually pass it through solid matter, right? That is potentially possible. It could happen. I'm not saying it's likely, but it could happen. And if that's a possibility, then surely we can't objectively say that we can't put our hand through a table. Which means that we can't objectively say that our perspective on what a physical object is necessarily accurate. Because there could be all sorts of reasons why we can't interact with some physical objects. It's possible that there are physical objects in the world that we can't see and we can't interact with. I guess for us, we would say, well, they're not a physical object then. But that's down to language and the way that we have got our definition of a physical object as something that meets these criteria. But they only meet the criteria through the human experience. Like how we say the sky is blue, that criteria would not apply to a dog, because a dog only sees in black and white, I think. I think I read that somewhere. So if a dog only sees in black and white, the idea of the sky being blue is meaningless. It doesn't mean anything to the dog. So it's a subjective claim on our part. You could drill deeper into that and say the sky reflects only this spectrum, or this part of the spectrum of the wavelength of light that is hitting it and bouncing off. And that would be more accurate than the sky is blue, but it would still not really be more accurate. All you would be doing is changing the definition that you were using. No matter what definition you use, it would always have the same basic flaw, which is that it was invented by humans to explain human experiences. So I was talking about this with a guy online, and he said that it's paradoxical in nature to believe in a subjective universe. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing. And that if you are saying the universe is subjective, that would be an objective point you were making. So how could it be subjective if you were defining it objectively? But there's two kind of counters to that which I think are applicable. You've got, firstly, it's just my opinion. I believe the universe is subjective, and I will act accordingly. That's point number one. So it's not an objective claim, because as long as you preface it with, I believe this, which I've started doing with as much stuff as I can mentally like configure myself to do, to always preface it with I believe or I think, because I can never be sure, and stating stuff as a fact I don't know, it just doesn't strike me as something to really do these days, except I have the caveat that when you're discussing things with persuasion in mind, or you're trying to explain something to someone else, it can be useful to drop the I believe part and treat the universe as if it is objective, just because most people are treating it that way. And so you saying I believe can actually be seen as something that makes your argument less credible than if you just say this is how it is. It's not accurate, but it can be a better way of getting your point across, I would say, in my experience. But it can also make you come across as like a know-it-all or whatever, if you're saying this is how it is, or it can make you seem stubborn. And it gives you no real get-out clause. If someone disproves what you're saying, then you just look like a fool who claimed something without all the facts. But we're always claiming something without all the facts, because it's impossible for us to have all the facts, which is one of the advantages of prefacing everything with I believe. Seems like kind of a cop-out sometimes, but I don't believe it is a cop-out, because it's an accurate representation of what I'm saying, or what I believe. I believe. That's where this stuff starts layering, because my opinion on my thoughts is purely subjective as well. And occasionally you will say you believe something when you don't really believe it, but you've convinced yourself that you've believed it. So you got that challenge as well. So I would say, in closing, because this video is getting quite long, if you believe everything is subjective, which seems rational to me, I've certainly not seen anything that disproves it, then you should always be looking for more information to try and get as close to the shared truth as you possibly can. But you should also be looking within yourself constantly and criticizing your own thoughts, which is why I like to go online and have discussions with people who may vehemently disagree with my position, but it will let me get more of a handle on what I think, because I'll be there putting it down in words, and then I'll be able to analyze it after the fact and say, do I really believe that? Does that make sense? But I'll also be able to have other people criticize my thoughts and give their opinion, and then I can criticize their criticisms and see, does their criticism make sense? When it comes to objectivity and subjectivity, it tends to be the case that they don't make sense. in my experience. The objectivity point of view seems to believe that humans can perceive objective truths about the universe. But to me, I just don't see how that's possible with our limited senses. The second criticism I have of the paradox, I went off on a bit of a tangent there, but the second criticism of the paradox of we live in a subjective universe, that's an objective claim, that's a paradox, is that I think paradoxes might just be a limitation of the human mind, because there's no reason to assume that our minds are wired in such a way that it's even possible to understand how the universe works. There's never been anything said by anyone that could show that the human brain is designed to be able to understand the underlying fabric of the universe in which it exists. Just like how, well, maybe not just like, but sort of like how a video game character has no way of knowing it's in a video game. It's just not possible. You could give that video game character the most advanced AI ever, but unless you were from outside the video game universe sending it information about how it was in a video game, it would never reach that conclusion, because it wouldn't even know what a video game was. All it would know was the input that had been sent to it, which would all be contextual within its game world. So I don't believe we are designed in such a way where we can fully understand the complexities of the universe, and I think the limit of human understanding is where we hit the paradoxes. Because whenever you drill really deep into something, there tends to be a paradox at the center of it. I've been saying for a while that I think all truth involves a paradox, which is funny because I don't really believe there is any truth. But I guess by that I mean the closest approximation to truth that it's possible for us to attain tends to involve a paradox. But I haven't fully thought that through. It's just a little interesting thing to put on at the end of this video. But I'm at 24 minutes now, and nobody's going to watch this, so I'll just end it here. Catch you later, guys.